All right, so now that we have our clay centered, what we're going to go to next is actually forming this. So the first thing I'm actually going to show us how to do is how to form a cylinder. So I'm going to take my sponge that's kind of soaked with water and soak the clay and make sure my hands are damp as well. And I'm actually going to make this a little bit taller. So I'm just going to press on the outside with my left hand and slowly push in, and it's going to give me a little more height, as you can see. And if you form little sort of spirals, you can kind of take those out just with your hand. All right, so now I'm going to start actually forming this. So I'm going to start that by I'm bracing my arms against my legs really strongly. Always brace your arms on your legs and have your legs braced on the ground. If you don't do that, you are going to wobble around, which is really going to affect things. So I'm going to start this by, I'm going to rest both hands on the outside of this lump of clay, and my thumbs are going to rest in the middle against each other directly. If you're doing this with a larger amount of clay, you could use multiple fingers. I tend to always start with my thumbs and go from there. Always have your hands in contact with each other whenever possible, because this gives you sort of a tri-point of stability. So one sort of elbow on each leg, and then the hands brace together, and it gives you a really solid sort of setup. All right, I'm going to add a little more water, and now I'm just going to start to press in with my thumbs. And I want to do this pretty much as far down as I'm going to want this to be I'm just going to start with a V for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pen tool, I'm going to push it through the bottom of this piece, and I'm going to check the depth, which you can see I have about 3/8 of an inch left, which is actually at the point where I want to stop going down anymore on this, because if I go any further, I'm either not going to have enough room to trim, or as I continue to work on this, I'm actually going to tear out the base of this piece. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just curl my finger over this edge to flatten it out and even it out a little bit, just because as I've kind of messed with this, it can kind of set it off. So now I'm going to clean up the wheel head, use some water, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of brace my fingers like this, and I'm going to have two fingers starting in the middle of the pot, and I'm going to slowly move my fingers out, widening the bottom part of this piece. I'm also going to start pulling out a little bit on the top. I'm going to do that again. If you get too much water, take it out so that you can actually see what you're doing. I'm going to start at the center again. Now I'm going to start to curl my fingers under. I'm starting to use this part of my finger with my fingernails to push out. So I'm using the very ends of my finger, because I want to have this to the width I want it, and I'm going to have to start to move up just the side of this just a little bit. Just because I'm getting a little too far out. If you start to form a little ridge in the center, you should smooth that out now by just running your fingers over it, smoothing that into the sort of bottom surface. And notice how I'm doing most of this working at the 6 o'clock point. You always want to work at either 3 o'clock or 6 o'clock, unless you're left-handed, and then instead of 3 o'clock, you'll do 9 o'clock. All right, so I'm going to clear the water out again so I can see inside. So I want to widen this out a little more, so I'm actually going to work from this side now. So I'm going to use this part of my finger to start moving and widening out the base, and I'm sort of using this outside hand to brace the surface so the outside doesn't go too much further out, because I'm trying to start to thin the walls out a little bit. Right, there we go. So now I'm going to start to actually slowly pull up in a spiral. And I'm actually moving my hands slightly inward. If you go straight up, it's going to end up going out, especially at first. All right, so I have a fairly flat bottom on this, which is really good. If I want to form it a little better, I will take sort of my fingernail or a tool, and I will just press into the corner, which unfortunately you can't really see, and there's no real way to get a camera in so that you can see that. But I'll kind of show that at the end when I cut this apart. All right, so now I'm going to work on making this taller because I have the interior as wide as I want to. And something to keep in mind as you're throwing is that all of your pieces are going to lose about 10% of their size as they dry and fire. So I'm going to start with my hand. So I'm going to use my finger. If I'm using a lot of clay, sometimes I will kind of use my my thumb brace behind a finger like that. But for this little piece, I'm just going to use my fingertips. So I'm going to have my fingers on the inside kind of bracing. I'm not going to be doing most of the work with that hand. I'm going to be doing most of the work with my outside hand. So, and I'm going to start to kind of dig in a little bit into the surface. Now I'm going to slowly put pressure on it, moving that clay up. And it's going to feel a little weird. And again, I'm moving in rather than straight up, because as you notice with pinch pots, and I'm going to round off the top surface again, because you need to keep these under control, because as soon as this clay starts to go out, it is going to continue to go out. It has memory, and it always wants to go back to that. So I'm going to add water again. I'm going to start at the very bottom again, because I want to take the clay from there first. I'm going to slowly move this up the side of this piece. And this is the point at which, if your piece is off center, you're really going to feel it. I'm slowly thinning this out, and I'm easing up on the pressure I'm exerting on this piece as I get to the top until I'm easing off the surface. Don't make sudden movements or you will off balance your piece. All right, so now I'm going to round my finger over this. Now for most of you, if you can get a piece to this point, which is about 5, maybe 6 inches tall, you might call it good. It is about 3/8 of an inch thick. It might be close to 1/2 an inch towards the bottom, which is a little bit thick. I'm going to just lift this one more time, starting at the bottom, kind of digging in and moving up. And as this gets thinner, I am using less and less pressure to move the clay, because I do not want to risk going all the way through the surface. And again, I am pulling up and in. And I'm going to continue to do this until I have this piece the height I want. Be careful not to get too thin, because if you make it too thin, it's going to be near impossible to remove from the wheel. And then I'm going to just make sure I round off the top edge, because if this is going to be a cup, you do not want a sharp edge cup after it is glazed, because it will cut you. And then you can either leave the throwing marks, it's totally fine, or you can use your sponge and clean them up. Or if you really want something really straight-sided, you can use this sort of rig tool. And round it off. Right, and for your first couple of pieces, I want you to just try to get straight-sided cylinders. Once you've kind of gotten 1 or 2 of those, then you can go ahead and move on. From here, I've already gotten all of the water out of the center, which at this height, I kind of have to fold the sponge up to dip down into the middle. And then I am going to either take my stick tool or the pen tool. I generally prefer the stick tool for this. And I am just going to set it on the side and lightly digging into this little excess at the bottom that still exists until I'm all the way down to the wheel head. There, as you found with pinch pots, usually there is extra clay on the sides of a piece with throwing. And you want to remove as much of that as possible, as early as possible, because if you don't, then you are going to have to remove it later. And trust me, you do not want to spend all that time trimming if you don't have to. So then here is that piece, and I'm gonna call that good. I will have a further video on shaping, but this is where you're going to start. And then I'm gonna spread out just a little bit of water. Now I'm gonna pull my wire tool, so I've wrapped this around my fingers because I need this to be tight. I'm gonna pull it underneath the piece, and you saw how that moved. It's exactly what I want. I'm gonna kind of clean up my hands because if you try to grab this with wet hands, it is not gonna work. And I am going to very carefully grab where I trimmed because this is the driest spot, so I just kind of make V's with my fingers, and I should be able to just lift it up and move it. And there is a sort of finished wheel thrown cylinder.